Hello and welcome to the Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm your host, Macie Renae, and we are going on a journey together, my friend. If you've been looking for a podcast geared towards your growth, self-awareness, navigating your brain's daily mind drama, and deep inner work to become your highest and best self, you are in the perfect place. Let's get started. Good morning. Welcome back to another episode of Becoming Your Highest Self podcast. I'm Macie, and I'm so excited to have you here with me. If you're brand new, welcome. I hope you enjoy what you hear on the podcast. And if you're a returning listener, as always, thank you so much for your support. Thank you for sharing with friends, leaving reviews. A lot of you have been introducing yourselves to me on social media here recently, and I love it. I love getting to put a face to who my listeners are and just getting to know you and see your families and interact with you on social media. That's so fun for me. So if you're not following me on Instagram or Facebook already, make sure to do that. Reach out and say hi. I don't bite, so I would love to meet you. And oh my gosh, you guys, I've never had more consults in my life than I've had in the last 10 days. I feel like I have talked to someone new almost every single day, and it has been so much fun. If you recently did a consult with me, I want you to know that I enjoyed our time together so much. And the interesting thing is too, all of the consults that I had are people that I've never known before. So like a lot of the people that I've worked with in the past are people who have followed me for years and years. But on these recent consults, you all only have known me from what you hear on the podcast. And some of you didn't even have social media, so you haven't even been seeing my post. And it was just so much fun to be able to talk to you all. And some of you even became new clients. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to be working with some of you one-on-one. And then here's the bum news, drum roll, I guess you could say, is that I announced my newest program, and one of you that was on a consult signed up. So I already have one person in the brand new program that's just in pre-enrollment. So the program has not officially opened up fully with full access to the public. It will March, I think, 3rd or 4th. But pre-enrollment is open. So if you join the program, it's called the Equipped Society, and I'm so proud of it, you guys. But if you join it during pre-enrollment, you actually get bonus one-on-one calls. So the Equipped Society is a group program. It's a one-time investment. You get lifetime access. There are self-paced modules to help you grow in your emotional intelligence. Upon enrollment, you get to take the emotional intelligence assessment with a 20-page breakdown of how you scored. So it's going to show you exactly what you're doing well in your emotional intelligence and where you're kind of not. And then you're gonna know exactly where you need to begin. And I'm going to be coaching live every single week. So you can come to those live coaching calls and get coaching on whatever it is you're struggling with, whatever your life situations are, and how it relates back to emotional intelligence. And not only are you going to grow so much from showing up to the coaching, but then the people who are also witnessing you get coached are going to learn so much as well. And then you're going to learn from them getting coached. So I'm super excited. It's actually packed with much more than that, but I'm not going to go into all those details on the podcast because it can be overwhelming. I really wanted to build a program that didn't rush people in their growth process. So that's why I made it lifetime access, and I wanted it to be self-paced so that way you can log in, you can consume what you want, when you want, however many times that you want, apply it to your real life, because that's what's most important in improving your emotional intelligence is that you're actually, applying the things that you're being taught. And then whenever you're struggling or you want to even celebrate yourself, you can come on the weekly live coaching calls and share maybe something you're struggling with, get live coaching, learn from other people who are getting coached. They're going to learn from you. And, have a community environment where everybody's supporting and cheering each other on. So there's a big vision for this. I'm just so excited. If you need any details about getting inside, you can schedule a consult at macierenae.com, or you can just go ahead on the Equipped Society page and enter pre-enrollment and you get private one-on-one coaching calls with me as a bonus that will go away once this actually releases to the public for everyone. So just a heads up on that. Today, we are going to talk about emotions and parenting. Okay, so I'm going to be bringing to you my 10 years of working in pediatrics, specifically in the home. So you know that I was an occupational therapist for 6 years before I became a full-time coach. I've only been full-time coaching now for about a year, almost close to a year in April that I stepped away from pediatric occupational therapy. But before that, I was actually working in the homes with children as what was called in Kentucky as a CLS worker, and that means community living support. So I went in the homes of children that had special needs and basically helped them develop their everyday life skills as well as community skills to be able to like pay for things in public and order their own food when we went to a restaurant and, you know, be able to buy a movie ticket and go out in the community and make sure that their behavior was good and all of that kind of stuff, and that they knew how to carry themselves really well. So I have had a front row seat, I guess, if you will, a front row seat to really engaging and interacting with families and knowing them at a much more intimate level than when you're working in a hospital or when you're working in acute care. Because when you're working in a hospital, you maybe have the patients for a few days. If they're in inpatient rehab, you might have them a couple weeks, maybe a few months if it's something severe like stroke rehab or traumatic brain injury or something like that. But whenever you do what I did, which was early intervention with birth to age 3 and CLS work prior to finishing school as an occupational therapist, I had a front row seat in the lives of the families that I was working with. And I served over 350 families just in my 6 years as a pediatric occupational therapist. And I learned so much. I learned the dynamics of the families, and I learned a variety of family routines, and I learned various parenting styles, and over 350 families, not one parent parented exactly the same. And I was just able to learn and grow and be immersed in so many different human experiences. I was there for some of the most shattering news. Sometimes I was there for the celebrations. And, you know, as a result, I think my career really did make me a better coach because I really learned how to read people. I learned how to work with a lot of different energies. You know, some families were a little intimidating and intense and very meticulous, and other families were super, super lax, more lax than, you know, maybe I would be. And there was just everything, every range of every human being. And I had to learn how to work with every single type of personality. And, you know, with being in the homes and the potential for starting with the child very young, when you're an early interventionist, early interventionist, by the way, means that you work with birth to age 3 population. They age out after year 3 by the state guidelines. So you cannot serve a child in early intervention after their 3rd birthday. So some of these kids I was with for years, I would get them at like 5 months old or 10 months old, and I would be with them up until age 3. And the interesting thing is that, you know, I was exposed to coaching while I was in occupational therapy, a few years into being an occupational therapist. And because of that, I really challenged myself to stay with even families that were sometimes very triggering for me for various reasons. Because I figured if I can master being around any type of personality, then that's going to really help me. That's going to help future families that are maybe hard, you know, and that was before I even knew that I was going to step away one day and be a full-time life coach, but it served me so well. So I wanted to talk about emotions and kind of talk about like the coaching side mixed with your parenting, mixed with kids, okay? And I think it's going to be a very enlightening episode to kind of help you see a different perspective. Now, I know that there's going to be people that listen to this and they're going to think, do you even have children? I do not have children of my own yet. However, I have been very, very involved with the kids that I have had, being that I've been in the home with them. And of course, it's not the same as what you guys are going through. I'm not going to discount that at all because trust me, I worked also with a lot of stay-at-home moms, and whenever I got there, sometimes in sessions, it was like, oh, thank God the therapist is here. I need a break. This is really hard. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of these families had multiple children, and the child that I'm working with is developmentally delayed or intellectually delayed. And so there's challenges that come with that as well. And some of them were, diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And that was a new diagnosis for the family. So they were navigating big emotions. The child is being who they're being. And sometimes that was really difficult for the family. So I just have a lot of experience being in a lot of situations that are very real life. And although I do not have children of my own and will never understand until I have children of my own, I do have a pretty good idea. So I think if you're able to hang in there with me for this episode, you may learn a lot. And if you hear this episode and there are parents that you think also need to hear it because they're stressing out and the parenting thing is really just weighing them down, because being a caregiver is really hard. It's the most selfless thing you will ever do. And the most challenging thing you will ever do. There were certainly days where I would see 6 kids in a row under age 3, and I would come home and be very grateful that I had the ability to take a nap, which was not the luxury of the parents' situations that I was in, right? Like they had to keep going all day long. And so I am not naive to that. So I want to talk, though, about how this all will tie into what you can take away from coaching and emotional intelligence. And I hope that it serves you really, really well. So parenting is good, right? Until it isn't, until your child is maybe being a quote unquote turd, or, I've heard parents say all of the things, but basically whenever your child is going through emotional waves, that's when parenting can become really difficult, whether your child is very young and a newborn, or your child is in those precious, amazing teen years that I hear parents love. I'm being sarcastic because a lot of times parents are not loving the preteen and teen years until they're almost like out of the house. That's whenever I think you appreciate more of your teen, because those years with hormones are rough. But in terms of children and their emotions, here's what I really want you to understand. So we're going to talk first about like whenever you have a newborn child. When you have a newborn child, they obviously do not know how to regulate their emotions. So what they do to communicate is cry, whimper, ooh, ah, gaga. They make eye contact. Their body language will communicate a whole lot with you. And so as the adult, as the caretaker, as the parent, our job is to really read into what they're trying to communicate non-verbally, okay? So you're really becoming keen on that non-verbal communication and maybe what they're trying to communicate. If they're crying, you go down a list in your mind of like, are they wet? Are they hungry? Do they need more like love and attention? Do they need some skin on skin, time for like coddling? Like, what is it exactly that they're needing? Are they hungry? All that kind of stuff. Are they sleepy? So we have to get very in tune with their emotional needs and their basic needs, okay? Like their survival kind of needs. Now, as children get older into that, toddler kind of age and young child kind of age, what I want you to understand as well is that even though they are learning a lot and they're likely understanding a lot, they still can't process everything in a mature way, the way that an adult can. Now, this may seem like common sense, but it's going to make more sense later, because obviously in my line of work, I see a lot of parents become triggered, right? Become triggered by their child's emotional outburst and feeling very defeated and very stressed about how in the world do I handle this? I feel like I'm not getting what I need. How in the world am I supposed to take care of my kid and not screw them up? That's usually a parent's biggest fear, is like, I'm going to screw my kid up because I don't even feel like I have the emotional capacity. And we're going to get to that. So whenever your child is really, really young, they do not know how to logic or reason. So yes, they're taking in a lot of information and they may understand the things that you're saying, but they still do not have the communication skills. They cannot maturely articulate everything that is happening in their body. They don't understand it. So I want you to bring awareness to the fact that whenever, for instance, your toddler is having a full-blown meltdown, whether it's at home in an environment where they feel really safe, or in public at the grocery store where everyone is staring at you and likely judging you, right? Because that's always our biggest fear too, is that everybody's staring and they're judging and all of the things, that your child in that moment is still communicating. Okay, they're still communicating. They don't know how to articulate their emotional experiences yet. So yes, they might be crying over the fact that you said no to the toy at Target, or you said no to the chocolate bar at the front where you're unloading your groceries. And all they know in that moment, right? Because they can't process necessarily the thoughts that they're having, but their thought is likely like, it's not fair. Mom or dad is the meanest. I'm really going to suffer without the candy bar. I'm not going to survive without the toy. Like it's a big thought, right, that they're having, but they don't know how to articulate that. So then it comes off as big emotion in the only way that they know how. And the way that they do that a lot of times is going to be laying on the floor. I call it becoming like a spaghetti worm, where you try to pick them up and they either are the limpest noodle, and so they're so heavy because they're a limp noodle, or they become super stiff because they're just so rigid and angry and upset that they become rigid. They're likely like screaming or crying. And what matters most in that moment is what is happening inside of you in order to really handle that situation well for everyone, okay? Now, what typically happens in that moment, and trust me, even as an occupational therapist, you have to consider too, my job, I had a lot of kids that had maybe sensory processing disorder. So that is when a child cannot necessarily communicate what it is that they need, but what they're experiencing from their senses. So it could be that they become overstimulated with sound, or they become overstimulated with light or certain textures or the clothing that they're wearing, okay? And they become very overstimulated, and because they don't have that impulse control built in, which is an emotional intelligence skill, because they're still little and their brains are still developing, they just freak out. And so what happens is a lot of times parents are like, why are you freaking out? Like, all I did was put your sock and shoe on. But the child's neurological system is not able to process nor communicate what is happening to them. They just know it's a big fat no. And so what the parent sees is this tantrum and this horrible emotion. And this happens with kids with autism as well, right? So they see this big emotion come out. And a lot of times they just go into fight or flight themselves, and they're like trying to fix it, but then nothing that they're doing is fixing it, and they don't know, like what exactly is going on. And so that's where I would come into the picture as a therapist, like helping them understand what's going on with their child and what we can do about it. So sometimes that meant even joining them on a grocery trip run or to the mall at the play place whenever they were playing with other kids. And the parent would say, this is something that we need to be able to do. I need to be able to go to the grocery store and them not have a meltdown. I need to be able to take them to play with other kids and understand why they're not socializing or why they're freaking out. So I would come in and I'd do a lot of observation and then a lot of coaching for even the parents of what's happening, why it's happening, all of that, and really helping them understand and know what to do in the situation. And so what I've observed after 6 years of doing this is that a lot of times the parent is not putting on their oxygen mask first, okay? You're not getting enough self-care. Your cup is not full. Your emotions are also and have been for probably a while shoved down You may even know that you buffer and you distract yourself from your emotions, that you're managing and handling a lot of stress, that you feel like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. And so all of the things that you're even doing on a daily basis, like maybe not processing your thoughts, not being aware of your thoughts, not being in tune with your emotions, not knowing how to feel your emotions, by the time your kid has a big emotion, you have very limited capacity to even help them understand theirs if you do not understand yours. So what this looks like is the kid will have a full-blown tantrum, and the parent comes off very calm at first. And then when the kid continues to explore this emotion and feel this emotion, because guess what? Kids will feel the emotion as long as it takes them to move through it. Sometimes that can be very quick in less than 30 seconds. Sometimes it's 2 to 5 minutes. But a lot of times kids will just keep processing the emotion until it's over for them. They're fully immersed in their experience. They haven't been told by the world yet or molded by the world yet to be a certain way or to handle themselves a certain way. We teach that as the leader, as the adult, right? Like, stop crying, or you're being dramatic, or just little comments like that is what teaches them kind of what they're going to start doing with their emotions. But when they're really little and they're having the full-blown tantrum, they're experiencing it at the fullest capacity, and their body just fills it in whatever way it knows how. But because we've been guided by our own upbringing, like our own parents, and our parents had the same experience with their parents, we have learned, a lot of us, to stop crying or to not even feel the emotion because it's inappropriate, because you're in a public place, because. So what I want to bring your awareness to is that they're feeling the full range of their emotions, but what happens to you as they do? For a lot of parents, they have a little bit of tolerance for a little bit, and then they start to have an emotional experience themselves. Your emotional experience may be stressed, unable to handle how loud they're screaming, unable to handle the crying, unable to deal with the tantruming, unable to, handle their mood because it feels like it's putting you in a bad mood. You just wanted to have a good day, whatever it is. And so what I want to draw your attention to is that whenever you're not aware of what's happening in yourself as your child is feeling the full range of emotion, that is what creates such an explosive moment where a lot of times later you lose your cool, and then later you feel a lot of guilt around that because you're not experiencing the full range of your own emotions. You're not feeling it and moving through it yourself. So whenever you have your own stuff that has built up over the course of time, and then your kids experience their own emotion, whenever you have not processed yours, you're adding what they're experiencing on top of yours, and that's what creates this very emotional kind of response. And so some of the phrases that I've heard over the years whenever the kids are having their full-blown emotional experiences are, well, they just want attention. They need to knock it off because they just want attention. What I want to offer you is really getting curious about why do they want the attention. So again, remember that their nonverbal communication is still communication. That crying is still communicating. That anger is still communicating. That sadness is still communicating. That walking away and pouting is still communicating. And one of the most powerful things that you can do in a moment where your child is experiencing their emotion is to first observe your own emotion with it. Are you losing yourself as well? Like, are you feeling like, oh my gosh, I need them to stop because I'm uncomfortable. I need them to pull it together because I'm stressed out. I need them to not be so dramatic right now because I have 10 other things on my plate. I need them to stop because their siblings are watching. Like, really observe what's happening in you first. Do that first, okay? As they're screaming, as they're crying, is it that you're tired? Is it that you feel like you need help? Is it that it's really like sensory overload for you? Is it like really observe what's happening in you first? Because I know like even as an occupational therapist, there's been times where I've been in a daycare setting and a child will start screaming or crying. And I can feel that my body is getting really, really agitated. And if I'm not super aware of myself, it is a moment where I can see exactly why a parent would snap. Now, I obviously don't do that because I'm in a professional setting and they're not my child. But I could see and I guess this is probably why I've developed this skill, is because in a situation where it's not my child, so I'm not going to obviously react the same way as if it's my own blood. I have to really sit with myself and ask what's happening inside of myself as this child is screaming at the top of their lungs, as they are, having behaviors that maybe I deem inappropriate. And remember that also whatever feelings you're feeling as the parent is a result of the thoughts you're thinking. So for instance, going back to if your thought is they just want attention, that's going to probably make you feel very dismissive and unaware of any reason they could give you as to why they're having the behavior that they're having. Does that make sense? Like if your thought is they just want attention, you're not really going to want to give them the attention because you think that they're just seeking something extra. But what if they're wanting attention? What if that thought that you're thinking about them is true? What if they do want attention? How can you be a more present, curious parent in that moment to really ask why they would be seeking the attention? Like, what are they doing? What is their behavior? Can you analyze it a little bit and figure out what need is not being fulfilled in them? If they're wanting attention, is it that they're wanting attention from you, but you haven't been able to give it to them because you've been in your own world of like what emotions you're trying to manage? Because remember, us as adults, we're all still learning how to become emotionally resilient and learn how to be with our emotions. That's why a lot of you are even here listening to the podcast. That's why a lot of you message me about the transformation it's making in your life, because you're becoming more aware of yourself. So if you think about yourself in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 60s, still trying to figure it out, think of how confusing that is for whatever age your child is that does not have a fully developed brain. Think about that for a moment. And if your thought is they just want attention and that's why they're acting out or screaming or crying, well, why do they need attention? Like, what is it? How can you become very curious and take yourself out of your emotional experience to be curious about theirs? And also then come back to yourself and say, why was I so triggered by it? Or why am I triggered that they want attention? What's happening there? So that's really what I've done as an occupational therapist over the course of several years. If I'm triggered by someone else's emotions, whether it's an adult or a child, I get curious as to why I'm triggered and what's happening in me. Like, do I not feel fully seen in my own emotions? Am I even paying attention to what I need? Am I paying attention to when I'm overstimulated and I'm tapped out? And do I need more self-care? Do I need more, me time? Do I need more, maybe attention to something? Do I need to go get coached? Do I need therapy? Like, whatever it is, if I can understand kind of why I'm having the response that I'm having first, then I can get more curious as to what the deeper behavior is in the child. And that's really been what I've helped parents do for the last 6 years. It's like, okay, I know that you're really, really frustrated right now, but let's put whatever emotion it's triggering in us aside for just a moment to figure out what big emotion they're feeling and why it's happening that way. Let's really observe it with a neutral pair of eyes and not from they're doing this to annoy me, they're doing this to seek attention, they're just looking for a reaction. If they're looking for a reaction, what reaction are they looking for? What are they seeking? Why are they doing that? I've heard some parents say like, well, they're just super sensitive. Well, how could that be a good thing? What parts of being sensitive seem bad, right? Sensitivity a lot of times means that they're willing to feel every emotion. Is it triggering because you don't feel every single emotion? Is it triggering because that range of emotions that they have is so hot and cold and up and down? And maybe if you don't know how to navigate that in your own experience, your own human experience, it's very hard for you to understand how a child could be in that range as well. This is not shaming anybody in their parenting. This is just getting very curious as to how to bring emotional awareness into your parenting process. I've heard parents say, like, they don't know how to behave. No, of course they don't. Their brain is not mature yet. Of course they know as they get older right from wrong. And even toddlers can understand when you are teaching them no, what is acceptable and what's not. But they still have thoughts that are associated with it, like, I want to do it anyways, or it's not going to hurt me, right? They think that they're invincible. Kind of like if a child's standing up in a chair and you're like, get down, you're going to fall. And they just kind of give you this look and you're like, get down, you're going to fall. And you have to guide them, right? You have to teach them. And sometimes they do fall and then they learn the lesson and then they have emotions with it. And then again, do we become completely frustrated that they just had to learn the lesson because we told them? Or do we hold space and lovingly kind of try to teach them exactly why we were guiding them the way that we were guiding them? So just be aware of your own emotional reactions as your children are having their emotional reactions, and know that they are communicating through that behavior. And sometimes it is in this very deep range that we don't quite understand, because as adults, the space wasn't always held for most of us to feel that full range of emotions. Like, I know for my sisters and I as children, we were always told, stop crying or I will give you something to cry about. Meaning, if you do not stop crying, you are going to get a whooping. You're going to get spanked. So it's going to get physical if you continue to cry. And as a kid, there would be times where I literally felt like I couldn't stop crying. Like, I just needed to keep crying to process what it was, whether it was no to the sleepover, or no, I don't want you to do that, or no, so-and-so cannot come over. If I had this deep emotional response and it went past my, caregiver's emotional capacity to let me feel it, it was usually like, okay, I've got a headache. That's enough. Or, okay, it's enough now. It's enough now. You need to stop crying. Or, if you keep crying, I'm actually going to whoop you because this is ridiculous and you should stop. And so as an adult now, I would just be very curious with, if I could sit with my child self and I could sit in my current adult body with my caregivers at that time, I would just be curious in asking them, what is it that was so triggering about them, about little me, right? Having a full emotional experience. Like, what is it that you became overloaded sensory wise? Is it that you didn't agree with how painful it could feel for me? Like, you didn't understand that it could have been this very dramatic thing for me and it just doesn't make sense. And so it needed to be shut down. Like, what is it? So I just want to get curious a lot of times, with understanding anybody's emotions. Same thing with like my everyday clients. When they feel what they feel, instead of dismissing it, this is a part of empathy as well. This helps build your empathy in emotional intelligence. So some people score really well in empathy and some people do not score very well in empathy. And empathy is the ability to basically understand someone's point of view, even if it's completely different from yours. And so bringing empathy into parenting can be super helpful, but it's very hard to do if you're not aware of your own emotions. And if you don't know how to sit with your own emotional experiences, then it's going to be very hard to hold emotional space for the range that your child has before they've learned kind of how to properly regulate themselves. And that's what I helped a lot with too, with toddlers, is emotional regulation, because they just feel their feelings and they feel them however their little body allows, or whatever capacity that they're allowed to feel it. And a lot of times what I learned, especially the years of having coaching as an OT versus the years when I first started and never had coaching as an OT, It's amazing how quick a child could move through their emotion when they were just granted the space to feel that range of emotion. When they were just like, whenever I would get on their level and just be curious as to what they were feeling and help them learn how to communicate it, or help them point to, what hurt, or help them describe what exactly was going on in their brain, or to even help them communicate maybe what they needed. Sometimes all they needed, they would have this huge reaction, and I would be in a daycare and the teacher would just keep screaming because it had been a long day and that daycare teacher was ready to go. And, she had stuff going on in her personal life. So again, personal, like emotional things that had not been dealt with. And so her emotional capacity to deal with the kids and their emotions, she just didn't have it. And it would be amazing. Sometimes I would go to the child that wasn't even on my caseload that was crying and get down to their level and literally look them eye to eye and say, are you sad? Or are you mad? And sometimes they could tell me, and then I would say, what do you need? Do you need a hug? Do you need to go see the toys that are over there? Do you want to read a book? And sometimes they just would say, I need a hug, I need a hug. And after that, it was over, and they would just smile and be happy. Now, not every situation is going to be like that, because as your kids get older, especially, they're learning more of the world. They've picked up on different behaviors. They're being influenced by, different people that are in their life. They're modeling things that they see. And then they're also still trying to navigate big emotions. So it's not always going to be easy. And sometimes those days of parenting are going to be really, really rough. Like, what in the hell do I even do in this situation? And that's where sometimes it takes a village. And it also takes you understanding what you're emotionally experiencing, and knowing how to sit with yourself and navigate your own emotions, so that by the time it's time to help lead and guide them, you have a clean slate. You have a different set of eyes. It's not about what you're necessarily feeling or needing in that moment, because if you're taking care of that ahead of time and not putting yourself on the back burner, it's going to be much easier to get curious and be fully immersed in whatever the child is going through without getting too attached to where you feel absolutely responsible. Now, I think as a parent, to some extent, you're going to feel your child's emotions and feel like whatever they're feeling is yours as well. But sometimes whenever you can really be that neutral party of just getting curious and understanding them, there's so much clarity on the other side when you're just open to hearing whatever it is they have to say, even if you don't agree with it. And that's really the strength of empathy. So when you're triggered as the adult, right, the leader, by the emotions of others, whether they're young or old, or, even if it's a parent of yours, you just want to get clear of what's happening inside of yourself, really manage that, work through that. And then that way you can also get into a place where no matter what is happening inside of your kids and their range of emotions, you have the capacity to really help them learn how to navigate theirs and learn how to build that emotional resilience and learn what is appropriate and what's not appropriate. And it will just make things so much, I don't want to say easier, because again, I'm not going to take away from the fact that parenting is the hardest thing I think that anybody will ever do, and the most rewarding yet most challenging role that you'll ever face. But I think when you really learn how to master your own emotional intelligence and grow in your own emotional intelligence, it only provides more space for helping your children do the exact same thing. And so I just want to say kudos to you for even tuning in to this podcast and taking the information, and just doing the best that you can with what you currently have, and working every day to be the best version of you that you can. Think of your highest self and who you want to be as a parent. And I know that it's not always going to be easy, because there are going to be moments where you're triggered and you're tired and your needs are not met, and you've been sacrificing a lot in order to take care of your family. But always remember that it is absolutely okay to come back to yourself and put your oxygen mask on first, because you cannot give that of what you do not have. If you're not holding the space for yourself to get what you need, it's going to be very hard to hold the space for whatever it is that your child needs as they're learning how to navigate their emotions, how to feel their emotions, how to communicate what it is in a clear manner. So I love you guys. If you have any questions about anything you heard on this episode, let me know, and I will see you guys again next week. Bye.